this is a very complex, nuanced issue, what's going on in Israel. And I think that President Biden has always supported Israel's right to defend itself. But I think he's also made clear that how it does so matters. And that's exactly what Vice President Harris has been saying on the campaign trail. And when it comes to Netanyahu visiting Congress to give his joint address that she refused to attend in the first place, I think that speaks also to how Biden sees it. And I think that President Biden, he has a very difficult choice. He's put in a very difficult situation because given his history in Congress, he's worked very closely with Israel-American relations. And he's kind of had a history that Vice President Harris doesn't. But that doesn't mean that he's the same as Donald Trump. It does not mean that he supports the massacre of people of Gaza. It just means that he is loyal to Israel in a way that is a product of his history in Congress as a policymaker.
Yeah, I mean, you alluded to the protests at campuses across the United States, and we've got similar protests here in the UK. But what is it about politics that interests you?
That's a great question. I mean, honestly, I think it's just the fact that it's so interesting. I think growing up, I've always liked everything. I've liked a little bit of math and science and history and social studies, but I think politics really puts it all together because politics is about everything and anything and everything, right? When it comes to science or math or technology or AI or reproductive healthcare or climate change or gun violence, all of that is encompassed by politics because it affects every facet of our life, whether it's STEM, entertainment, the arts. And so I feel like I get to learn a little bit about everything. And also I'm learning about how, the government can impact the world and how we can do that through legislation and policies. And that to me is fascinating because it's making an impact on the world and our community around us.
Because obviously lots of your friends will probably be interested in, doing what students do at student campuses rather than being involved in a presidential election. What's the atmosphere like in the campuses in which you're working and working towards?
I mean, it's definitely different. I think it varies by campus, but I think that right now, given what is going on in the state of politics and the state of polarization in the United States, I think a lot of young people are a lot more politically involved than maybe we have seen in decades. I think if you look at the last presidential election and compare it to this one, I think the amount of excitement that young people have towards voting, getting involved, learning about policy issues, about candidates, about how to vote and what to vote for, I think has changed dramatically.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're just going to have to take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking once again to the National Communication Director for the College Democrats of America, who's joining us live from Washington, D.C., reflecting on this U.S. presidential election. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll continue this very important conversation. And thank you so much for your questions that are coming through. We'll get through some of them very, very shortly. We'll see you very shortly after these short messages. Assalamu alaikum.
Sainsbury's. Oh, he made her money.
Hey Sainsbury's, explain it, will you?
Well, the same effort we put into our baking
goes into matching prices.
Remarkable. We've actually come in under budget.
Get it now?
Already got it.
Sainsbury's. Good food for all of us.
Our generation's risk of illnesses, like measles and whooping cough, is rising.
If we're not vaccinated,
we're not protected.
And could get seriously ill.
Risking lifelong disabilities. Are your child's vaccines up to date?
I'm in. Now, you ready for a good day?
He was a scientific hypothesis. She was a clinical study. And the future breakthrough that could cure her is closer than ever. With our research, we can keep saving lives like hers. Donate now to turn science fiction into reality.
Sainsbury's. Oh, he made her money.
Hey Sainsbury's, explain it, will you?
Well, the same effort we put into our baking
goes into matching prices.
Remarkable. We've actually come in under budget.
Get it now?
Already got it.
Sainsbury's. Good food for all of us.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Questions with me, your host, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV. We're reflecting on the US general election, which is in November. It is on, I think, November the 4th. Let me just get that right. Let's see if it is November. Yes, it is. Sorry, November the 5th is the election for president, as well as an election for the House of Representatives, Congress, and also the Senate as well, amongst many local government elections as well across the United States. And we'll be covering it here on British Muslim TV. We've got a big special debate the night before the election, so that Monday night, Monday the 4th of November, we'll be on air with a very special, lively debate between the Democrats and the Republicans here on British Muslim TV. Do tune in for that. And in the run-up to these elections, we'll be also talking to prominent American Muslims about the issues that matter to them. Keep watching British Muslim TV. But tonight we're really honoured and privileged to be joined by Sohaili Vadula, who's the National Director of Comms for the College Democrats of America, which is linked to the Democratic Party of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. How did you feel when President Biden decided to call it quits and Kamala was kind of anointed as the successor?
I was a little bit relieved because I didn't think that Joe Biden had the capacity to win the election at that point in time. But I was also a little nervous because I wasn't sure that Kamala Harris could also do the same, because polling showed that she was doing better than Biden, but not that much better. And also, there were all these other front runners that we could have had if we had had a typical primary, like Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, and other people in the Democratic Party that have already established themselves as leaders. So I think I was a little bit nervous, but I think, it's safe to say that at this point, everyone is very excited about Kamala Harris running as the nominee.
Yeah, because maybe it's because 4 years ago there was a pandemic, there wasn't the sort of big arena gatherings and speeches and events, but this time she seems to be packing out stadiums, 15,000, 20,000, 25, 30,000, huge crowds. Is that enthusiasm real in some of those battleground states?
Yeah, 100%. I don't live in a battleground state, so I haven't been to one of these in person, but I did go to the Democratic National Convention, and the excitement was truly electric. I think there are so many people that wanted to come in. In fact, this entire stadium was booked to capacity. The United Center, I think they were breaking health code violations because of how many people were in that room.
Yeah, that's really important because obviously for those of our British viewers, that is the moment when the candidate is officially proclaimed as the official party nomination for president. The Republicans anointed Donald Trump. What 3 words would you describe Donald Trump as?
Felon, crook, and criminal.
Crook, criminal, and what was the first one?
Felon.
Well, felon, obviously, because he's been convicted in this New York trial. I mean, do you think it's the end of Donald Trump?
I think that we have to be very conscious. I think that's part of it, but I also think we have to be conscious of the fact that Donald Trump is not the only person involved in this large game in which this corrupt system aims to back him, right? It's not just about him. Even if we win this election, I think it's still important to keep in mind that there are plenty of other people out there that are, playing this game with him, like Ted Cruz, Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, all these people that are still in the game, that are still trying to push the same right-wing MAGA extreme values and policies into American government, they still exist. And I think it's still important to be cautious about that. The end of Trump will not be the end of far-right wing values or populism.
Okay, so Rihanna from Hull is saying, isn't it about the economy? The fact that the price of gas, the price of everyday groceries has massively gone up under Joe Biden's time as president, and people are looking for good times again, and they look at the record of Donald Trump up until the pandemic, the economy was growing very, very strong, and they want to go back to that.
So I think it's actually a misconception that Republicans tend to do better in terms of the economy, because, we have to look at the fact that there was a global pandemic when Joe Biden got elected, right? And had it not been for that pandemic, chances are the economy would have been well. And so to say that Joe Biden is the reason the economy wasn't doing so well is very much not true. I think it has a lot to do with the pandemic and the way that Donald Trump handled the pandemic right before his term ended in 2020. And I think that has huge implications for how the economy does. It has to do with external factors and not necessarily like president switching over.
But there is a difference at a cost of gas, for example. Was it $2 or $3 under Donald Trump? It's gone up to $3.50 now. It's on its way back down. But you look at that, and you look at the sort of people. If you look, I don't know, the Rust Belt and some of the battleground states who feel left behind by globalization, economic prosperity is not touching them.
Yeah, I understand that completely. Yeah. But I think it's also important to look at the fact that, you know, the way that economics works is that because Joe Biden led the country to have a record low unemployment rate, inflation shot up because that is, you know, correlational, right? When unemployment goes down, inflation tends to go up. But also it's important to look at the fact that he put millions of jobs back into the economy, especially in the clean energy sector, which is what led to the record low unemployment, which did help people in the Rust Belt and these battleground states, and people that saw inflation that went up. So I think in the end, a lot of people were able to get the jobs they lost during the pandemic. And as a result, they were paying a little bit more. But, you know, despite everything, inflation has come down, you know, since then. And the Federal Reserve and has made tremendous strides to correct this. And despite everything going on, including a global pandemic and an almost recession, no recession actually occurred. And that's thanks to Joe Biden's economic policy.
Yeah, because if you go by the actual gasoline prices, they actually rose in the first 2 years of Donald Trump's first 2 years in office, which obviously reversed the 2-year trend that ended President Obama's term. And by year 3, prices fell slightly, and then we had a pandemic, and obviously the cost of gasoline went down. I don't know. I just feel that when I go to the States and I talk to people here on my program from the United States, there is a lot of apathy for the political ruling class, and Donald Trump seems to have tapped into that as the outsider.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting how Donald Trump rose to power. I think he was really able to tap into the populist tactics that you can use when campaigning, when trying to appeal to large groups of people. It's something that very few people have done successfully, and he has. And it's because he has been able to speak to people that have been outcasted from the political process for so long. And I think that's what made him so successful. It's what people like Bernie Sanders are trying to do as well, but in different ways, of course, because essentially I think we're all trying to like reach the same people that at the end of the day have the same concerns, right? They just want a good economy. They just want a job, a roof over their table, a roof over their heads, food on their table. So it all comes down to the same things, but I think it's the rhetoric and the messaging and the actions that prove to be very different. And so even though Donald Trump is an outsider, he was able to do that. But it's important to keep in mind, at the end of the day, he is an outsider, right? Like he lives lives very different from the average American. He is a billionaire. He was in the entertainment industry. He has inherited wealth, intergenerational wealth to be specific. And that's something that most Americans can't relate to. And it means that he's out of touch with reality that most Americans face on a day-to-day basis, including like unemployment, working paycheck to paycheck, sending their kids to school and saving up for college. Like these are things that he does not know and will never know. And I think that's what makes him someone that isn't a great leader compared to people like Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, and that elitism, he's part of the elite of American society because he's a billionaire. He's got all these properties, and yet he's been able to tap into a narrative which is that he's for the people. What do you make of the sort of narrative that's been built about ethnic minorities, black people, Asian people, Muslims, refugees, asylum seekers? Or migrants, as you call them.
Yeah, kind of going back to what I said earlier, I think the reason that Donald Trump was able to tap into the system is truly because he's elite. I think that because of the money and the power and influence he's able to, combine, that is what made him so successful politically. And I think that's something that, like you said, migrants struggle with because we don't have this intergenerational wealth, right? We're not billionaires. Most people in America, especially immigrants, especially people that are of the working class, of middle America, they aren't the people that have $1 billion in their bank accounts. They don't have properties or index funds or savings to help their children into elite institutions that he did and was able to do. And so I think there's this kind of class divide. It's less of a race divide and much more of a class divide as to who is able to access what and who is able to get where. And that exists currently institutionally in America, within the government, within politics, within education, everywhere.
I don't know, Sahela, I just feel the Democrats kind of, you probably sign you're probably really happy now because you've got enthusiasm, you've got momentum. She was very, very good, wasn't she, at the debate? She was able to rattle Donald Trump. The force is with you, but are you complacent, or do you think it's in the bag?
I think it's very important to not get complacent, because this is exactly what people have said about Hillary Clinton in 2016, and the polls were wrong. And so I think it's very much possible that that can still be the case. But that being said, I think it's important to realize this isn't 2016, which means that, we have a different candidate. We have more information about a specific candidate than we did before. And it's important to consider that, because Donald Trump was not a convicted felon in 2016. He was not found guilty on 34 counts. He also didn't have this many criminal court cases and trials against him. And the person running against him was also not Kamala Harris. So we have to look at it from a different lens, but also keep in mind and learn the lessons from the past.
Are young people enthused with this election campaign on the campuses? Are you seeing the same?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was there in 2008 during the Obama election, covering for TV. And I don't know, when I was at, for example, Wayne State University in Detroit, there was massive enthusiasm there for Obama in that election campaign. Do you think Kamala Harris has mirrored that same enthusiasm?
I think so, for sure. Because I think after everything that we've seen in the past 8 years with Donald Trump kind of being in the political scene, since 2016, there have been, a lot of differences in the way that young people perceive politics. Politics is no longer something that people think about as a hobby or a pastime. They think of it as something that now impacts every facet of their life, because it does. It's gotten to the point where politics is so deeply ingrained in our values too. What it means to be a Republican today and to be a supporter of Donald Trump means a very different thing than it used to be when people said that they were a supporter of Jimmy Carter or George W. Bush. It is a very different time. And now I think young people are just a lot more, not only enthusiastic, but a lot more invested in the state of politics, because we have people that are bringing attention to these things, pop culture idols like Taylor Swift and Chappell Roan and all these people that are making statements about politics, that are bringing it and making it relevant, because it is. And it is also impacting us more than it ever has before as young people, from reproductive rights to gun violence, as youth face more instances of gun violence than any other demographic in the United States. And not to mention climate change, something that our generation has grappled with so much more. So yeah, the enthusiasm is very much real, and it's because it's more important now than ever to be involved in politics.
Okay, thank you so much, Sohaili. I know you're staying there with us. We've got 2 more short segments. We're going to stay there, please. And we're going to take a very quick break, and we'll take some comments and questions, which are coming through quite thick and fast. Join us on the other side of these short messages. We'll be back shortly. Assalamu alaikum.
Sainsbury's. Oh, he made her money.
Hey Sainsbury's, explain it, will you?
Well, the same effort we put into our baking
Goes into matching prices.
Remarkable. We've actually come in under budget.
Get it now?
Already got it.
Sainsbury's. Good food for all of us.
Our generation's risk of illnesses, like measles and whooping cough, is rising.
If we're not vaccinated,
We're not protected.
and could get seriously ill.
Risking lifelong disabilities. Are your child's vaccines up to date?
I'm in. Now, you ready for a good day?
He was a scientific hypothesis. She was a clinical study. And the future breakthrough that could cure her is closer than ever. With our research, we can keep saving lives like hers. Donate now to turn science fiction into reality.
Sainsbury's. Oh, he made her money.
Hey Sainsbury's, explain it, will you?
well. The same effort we put into our baking
Goes into matching prices.
Remarkable. We've actually come in under budget.
Get it now?
Already got it.
Sainsbury's. Good food for all of us.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV, reflecting on the US election with Suhali Vadalu, who's the National Director of Communication for the College Democrats of America, in the thick of this campaign, which is on November the 5th. Suhali, we're getting a question from Brother Saj, who says, Donald Trump tried to steal the election last time. There was violence, insurrection at Congress on January the 6th. How fearful are how fearful are young people that we might see a repeat of that and former President Trump refusing to accept if he lost?
That's very much possible. We've seen that this is the man that will do anything he can to make sure that he wins, even if that means he has to change the system in order to prop himself up. So I would not be surprised if that happened again. In fact, we're already seeing in the Georgia State Election Board that they are changing the rules to hand count ballots. They are essentially setting the system up to fail so that when something goes wrong and, Kamala Harris wins, they can refute it by saying the system was not, working properly enough and that there were mistakes and they were faults in the way that elections were being handled in the state of Georgia.
Yeah. So are you, I don't know, are Democrats, are you concerned about the trajectory towards denying this election result as well if it doesn't go the way of Donald Trump?
I definitely am, because we've seen instances of where ballots were not being counted in places like Harris County in Houston, Texas, or where in Georgia, Donald Trump was calling the Secretary of State to ask him to find ballots for him. And I think these are just very small instances. I'm sure there's more too, right? It's happened in Arizona, it's happening in Pennsylvania, it's happening in these swing states that where election matters most. So I'm definitely concerned, but I also think this is very much an issue that matters in terms of the courts, and they will handle this. Chances are a lot of these things will end up going to the Supreme Court, which is not really a safe, something that's safe to think about, because the court is packed with right-wing justices that he handpicked himself. So it's definitely a tough situation to be in, but I hope in the end of the day, what will prevail is democracy, and that if people just go vote in overwhelming numbers, that's just something that nobody can deny, including election boards, even if they are Republican dominated.
I think that's what former First Lady Michelle Obama said at the Democratic National Convention, vote and vote big, so that there is no room for an opportunity for the Republicans to claim that the election was rigged. And Anila is asking around what is the outreach to the American Muslim community? What does that look like?
Well, we have many coalitions, right? The Democratic Party and the Harris campaign is doing a lot of coalition building. There's Youth for Harris, there's Students for Harris, there's Women for Harris, Progressives for Harris, AAPIs for Harris. And so there's even a Jewish community out there rallying for Harris. There definitely is a Muslim community as well, especially in states like Michigan, in states like North Carolina, in states where the Arab community is very prevalent. And so there is being a lot of outreach done. I'm not sure that it's enough, but definitely there is.
Yeah, that's really, really important. And because the feedback, we're just going to get some more questions that are coming to. Brother Faisal's asking, how important is Gaza and Americans' support for Israel playing in this campaign? Because we've heard a lot. We heard from Abandon Biden, Abandon Kamala Harris campaign, who were on my program previously, this campaign to not support the Democratic ticket. And they've announced that they're not going to support Donald Trump either. They'll probably sit this out or vote for one of the smaller candidates. What's your reaction to what brother's saying there?
I think Gaza is a very important issue for a lot of American voters, especially those that are undecided, and more specifically for young voters, especially between the ages of 18 and 30. I think that's one of the top 5 issues that people are voting on, including myself, because this is an issue that isn't just partisan. It's not about Republicans, Democrats. It's about right versus wrong. And specifically because of that, I'm voting for Kamala Harris.
Yeah, and driven by that progressive agenda. And the fact, and she's not tapped into it as much as you would expect. Very much like President Obama in 2008, he didn't play up his race in that campaign. Do you think Kamala's not playing up her agenda? The fact that she could make history? She's already made history as the first vice president, female vice president, but she could be the first female president.
I think she's trying to play it safe, because I think a lot of the times female candidates face a lot of pressure and a lot of backlash for trying to essentially, weaponize their abilities or identities in elections. And she's trying to be very cautious about it because it's not just about her being the first woman, right? She's trying to focus on being somebody that has policy that is genuinely better than the other candidate. So I think she's trying to focus on that because a lot of the time people will get very much, not agitated, but I think people will get off put by the fact that, somebody's only talking about the fact that their identities like race and gender, because identity politics aren't the most, is not the best strategy to win an election, especially like this. And we've seen that with Hillary Clinton, right? Like all the buzz around her being a woman didn't necessarily help her win. I don't think that was something she needed to focus on, but more as to her policy stances. And that's exactly what Kamala Harris is doing. And, like you said before, like she would like to be the first, but she knows she won't be the last. And that's something she has always said. So it's important to her to like recognize her identity, but not to weaponize it and to make it the focal point of her election.
Sammy's asking, would Kamala Harris accept if she lost? Would there be a smooth transition to Donald Trump and the Republicans?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if we've seen anything, one of the starkest differences between Democrats and Republicans is that we're able to lose gracefully and that we will accept it and we will move on. And we hope the other side would do the same.
Yeah, you would hope that the other side would do that. But we know what happened on January the 6th at the Congress. We were actually live on air here on British Muslim TV when the violence broke out. How hopeful are you for the future of America democracy?
I'm quite hopeful because of my generation, because of our moral clarity in comparison to our, elder counterparts. I'm a lot more hopeful because of the values that young people want to champion, whether it's in Congress, whether it's outside of it, whether it's in their daily lives. I think that Gen Z is special because we've seen things that other generations haven't. We've seen the aftermath of effects and issues and policies and societal constructs that maybe other generations haven't seen as up close. And I know we don't get a lot of credit often, but I think there's a lot to be done, and we are the generation to do it.
Yeah, and your generation, do you think, is more progressive, more in touch with the America's diversity than the Republicans?
I think so. And the reason is because I think we've seen government system failures, right? We've seen how systems like capitalism don't always work in the favor of the average American. We've seen how things like socialism get twisted and how like social welfare programs and all these things are put in jeopardy, or how the wealth inequality is growing, right? The wealth gap, the wealth distribution in America, how it's becoming harder to buy a house, to get a job, to afford a college education. And we're seeing these things because as the cost of living and prices of everything we have to buy is rising, our salaries are not. And that's something that I think is different compared to other generations, because it's a lot harder for me to want to be able to afford a home than it was for my parents because of generational gaps in terms of wealth inequality. Yeah. And so I think our generation is more progressive.
And so how do you bridge that divide, the gap between rich and poor, which seems to be widening in the United States between the haves and the have-nots?
I mean, there are so many different things that have to be done in order to bridge that gap, but I don't think it's going to be, happening anytime soon. But I do think it's an incremental progress that has to take place. So I think, first of all, the government has to intervene 100%. I think that we have to start all the way from the bottom and work our way up to the top. So that means better funding public education. It means that not allowing school choice, but instead bolstering public education. It means increasing the wages of public school teachers. It means creating programs where students can get like free school lunches, free tutoring, ways that can empower them to build their own journeys, their own educations, and making public colleges and private colleges more affordable in the United States, making healthcare more affordable and accessible for the elderly, as well as students and low-income families and children, making insurance easier to get, keeping the Affordable Care Act, bolstering programs like Medicare, and Medicare, I think is one of the best things we can do.
What's the support like on campus for the Republican Party?
It's there, but I would not say it's as strong as it is for Democrats. Rare. Because I mean, on my campus, I would say it's very rare because my campus is full of activists, people that care so much about the world. And I'm not saying Republicans don't care about the world. I'm just saying that we are a lot more liberal because we understand the state of the world we are in, and we understand the values that are important to us and that matter when it comes to democracy.
Yeah, and interestingly, if you're in where you are, Washington, D.C., Rhode Island, sort of those sort of blue states, you think that the presence on campus is somewhat different to, say, Florida or Texas. But Texas is in play now, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm actually from Texas. I would say it's not necessarily in play, but I definitely think that it's a state that everyone needs to keep their eyes on because, as much as we know that Texas,
it's in play in regards to the Senate election, which is neck and neck.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep our minds and not write it off because, that's the same thing that's happening with North Carolina. Democrats wrote that state off and saying, we're not going to win, we're not going to try, but that's not the case. We've seen Kamala Harris come to North Carolina, hold rallies, and now it's becoming a battleground state, especially because we have an important governor's race there going on right now, and state legislature is almost, neck and neck, and we have an amazing Democratic State Party chair there who is doing great work. And I think the Harris campaign is also focusing a lot of their energy in states like Texas, North Carolina, especially because it's so close and because it's not just about the presidential election. Like local races matter just as much, right? The Senate race, if Colin Allred were to beat Ted Cruz for the Texas Senate, it would be incredible. It would be monumental. And I think it's very much possible. We just need to make sure that people turn out to vote because in reality, there are a lot more Democrats in Texas than we know. It's just that they don't vote. And it's just a matter of getting people to go to the polls. And it's very much doable.
So I was just reflecting on this, Sohaili. I mean, that'd be huge. That'd be huge if Ted Cruz lost his seat. That'd be like a proper earthquake, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah. And I would be the happiest person because it is my home state.
Yeah. So we'll keep an eye on that. But the polls are suggesting that it's neck and neck, and it shouldn't really be neck and neck. You can't get more red than Texas, can you? It's the home of former President George W. Bush, who seems to be sitting out this election as well. We've got about a minute before the break, but how would you see that Senate election in Texas? Do you think Ted Cruz will win or lose?
I think he has a better chance of winning than losing, but I also think it's too early to tell. There's so much more work out to be done. Voting hasn't even started yet, and Colin Allred is set to have his first debate with Ted Cruz in October, coming up shortly. So I think a lot of the analysis as to who's going to win will come after
that. Okay. 30 seconds. Stay there, Sohaili. We're going to take a break. Okay, I said we were going to take a break. Takes a while to get used to all these cameras. Apologies for my earpiece as well. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll finish off, wrap up some reflections about the election, which is on November the 5th in the United States. Join us on the other side of this.
Sainsbury's. Oh, he made her money.
Hey Sainsbury's, explain it, will you?
Well, the same effort we put into our baking
Goes into matching prices.
Remarkable. We've actually come in under budget.
Get it now?
Already got it.
Sainsbury's. Good food for all of us.
Our generation's risk of illnesses, like measles and whooping cough, is rising. If we're not vaccinated, we're not protected and could get seriously ill, risking lifelong disabilities. Are your child's vaccines up to date?
I'm in. Now, you ready for a good day?
He was a scientific hypothesis. She was a clinical study. And the future breakthrough that could cure her is closer than ever. With our research, we can keep saving lives like hers. Donate now to turn science fiction into reality.
Sainsbury's. Oh, he made her money.
Hey Sainsbury's, explain it, will you?
well. The same effort we put into our baking
Goes into matching prices.
Remarkable. We've actually come in under budget.
Get it now?
Already got it.
Sainsbury's. Good food for all of us.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, your host Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively on British Muslim TV, wherever you are around the world. A very warm welcome. We're reflecting on the US elections. Tonight we're looking at the Democratic Party. In future weeks we'll be looking at the Republicans as well as the Independents. But tonight we're talking to Suhaila Vadula, who's the National Director of Communication for the College Democrats of America. We've got a question which I thought was really powerful, because I've got 4 daughters, and so gender equality is like a real big thing for me. And this question's from Sabs in Walsall, who says, what would having a female president sat behind in the Oval Office, behind a desk, have on gender equality around the world?
I think it makes a huge impact, because to see a woman on the highest office on the international stage sends a great signal to not just Americans, but also the entire world that this is possible and it can happen. And that things like that are possible in a country like America for many, many girls out there that are going to be looking at her on TV one day.
Okay, and Azhar says, how can you even begin to campaign for Kamala Harris when she is an ironclad supporter of Israeli action in Gaza, which has seen over 40,000 people be killed, including today, over nearly 300 people being killed in Lebanon?
Here's what I think. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the fact that no candidate will ever be perfect, but also it's important to think about the fact that some candidates are more receptive than others. So if there is something that I disagree with when it comes to Democrats or, Kamala Harris herself, I'm able to voice my concerns in a way that will be heard and that, they will take action. That's exactly what she's doing right now. She's currently, and her and President Biden are negotiating for a ceasefire, and they have been for a very long time. And that's largely due to the protests. It's largely due to Americans condemning the actions of the American government conspiring with the Israeli military.
She's still selling billions of dollars of weapons to Israel to carry on its military action in Gaza and now in Lebanon.
But despite the fact that she does believe that Israel has a right to defend itself, she's made it very clear that she is not okay with the way that Israel is defending itself. And insofar as the way that she's also dealing with the members of the uncommitted movement, how she's talked about how important it is for Palestinian liberation. And that's something we haven't seen before from President Biden or other Democrat candidates. So it's important to know the difference. And it's also important to note that progress is possible, but with the right candidate. Because I know for a fact that if I were to voice these concerns to Republicans or President Trump, things would not be moved. The needle would not move. My concerns wouldn't be heard. I would not have a seat at the table. But with Democrats, it's different. We can disagree. Also, we can work together to come up with solutions that work for everyone. And that's only possible within the Democratic Party at this time.
So I've got final 2 questions. One is around what do you make of the assassination attempts on former President Trump and the threat of violence?
I think that's very much a reality, and it's very possible. I think it's important we have to be careful as to how we handle this, because like I said before, we have to vote and show up in big numbers. It's the only way we can kind of avoid the violence that comes from it. We also need to predict it and kind of take precautions, whether that means putting more security at the Capitol, whatever it may be. We have to protect our institutions, our people, our democracy, most importantly.
So what does election night look for you? Where will you be on November the 5th?
I will be on campus with my friends here at Brown University. I will be watching on a very big screen in an auditorium somewhere on campus, and I will be also live tweeting at the same time. So I'm excited for that, and I'm also ready for that.
Yeah, well, I follow you on Twitter now, so we look forward to those tweets. Final question. Who's going to win on November the 5th? Donald Trump or Kamala Harris?
Could you repeat that question?
Who's going to win on November the 5th? Donald Trump or Kamala Harris?
I don't want to jinx anything, and I will be knocking on wood right now, but I do believe that Kamala Harris will be the next president of the United States.
Wow. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Suhaila Vadula. She's the National Director of Communication, the College Democrats of America, which is part of the Democratic Party, who was a delegate at the Democratic National Convention, which was happening in Chicago a few weeks ago. Thank you so much. Best wishes with your campaign. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on British Muslim TV. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Allah bless you. Suhaila Vadula there, who's the National Director of Communication for the College Democrats of America. reflecting this campaign, which is such a big campaign. Now, for British viewers, one of the things that we have to reflect on is the impact this election will have not just on our relationship between the new Labour government of Keir Starmer and the US government, but actually wider what is happening in Israel, in Gaza, and now in Lebanon. We've seen the death toll just now has gone up to 492 people have been killed across Lebanon. Israel has been striking Hezbollah targets. Well, they say Hezbollah targets, but what often happens is we see innocent people being killed. Children, women have been killed. Over 1,600 people have been injured in an Israeli airstrike in Lebanon. It's the deadliest day of violence between Israel and Hezbollah since the 2006 Lebanon war. In a speech, Israeli Prime Minister has told the people of Lebanon to get out of harm's way. I don't know where you expect them to go, because when they are evacuated, they generally tend to get bombed. Just ask the people in Gaza, because that's what happened to them in Gaza. They were told to move from one place to another place. When they moved to another place, they were attacked and bombed as well. Netanyahu has said that Israel is changing the balance of power on its northern front, and Israelis face complex days, whilst the Israeli military is saying that they are preparing for the next phase of these deadly strikes. Now, for those of us who have been to Gaza, like I have been for, twice over the last 10, 11 years, I can tell you about the resilience of the people of Gaza. These are people who have endured beyond imagination the atrocities, the killing, the scandal of occupation for so many decades. And they, like anybody else, want to be able to provide safety and security for their families. They want to be able to have economic opportunities. They want to be able to see their children grow up and make those dreams and see them thrive. And sadly, the reality is, as the new school term starts here in the UK and around the world, that their school term, this is their second school term that is started in the midst of war. And if you value human life, then you have to value all human life. And we as Muslims, we've got the best example, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, if you save one human life, it is as if you have saved the whole of humanity. And if you kill one human life, it is as if you have killed humanity. Look at the importance Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places on humanity. Just one life. And here we see over 40,000 people being killed in Gaza. And we see over, as we just said, 492 people so far being killed in Lebanon. And that the world doesn't value human life like we should, and we do as Muslims. And you can have differences with the Lebanese people, the Palestinian people, but now is a chance for us to show our strength and support for the Palestinian cause, because it's a noble cause. We don't support Hamas. We don't support Hezbollah. And this narrative which is that somehow if you support the Palestinians, you are supporting their work. No, we stand with the Palestinian people who are struggling for their freedom, for the right to be free, to choose their destiny, to live a life free from violence. And the sad reality is that the international community hasn't been able to do that. You know, if you think about the children who've been killed, forget the adults for a second, the children, 20,000 children have been killed. And you ask yourself, what would our reaction be if that was our child? And you know their reaction? Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. This is a struggle. This is a campaign here in the UK and around the world. Why do we stand with Palestine? Because it's a just cause. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, take a stance against injustice, even if it is against your own family and your own clan. That's the importance Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places on injustice. Injustice, brothers and sisters, is something which really requires us to just have a conscience. Jewish lives, Muslim lives, Christian lives, Hindu lives, these labels are just labels. Life is sacred. Human life is sacred. And it's a huge tragedy, an affront to international law and international norms that we see so many children being killed. I know about you, but I cannot watch those videos. You know, many of you will be parents like I am, and you just cannot begin to comprehend the trauma that those families are going through, and we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy for them. But as we finish tonight here, as we reflected there with Suhaili Wadula about the campaign for President of the United States on November the 5th, key question, many American Muslims are saying, what will it take? What will it take for the injustice to stop? The silence and the complicity of people who somehow find excuses for what is happening. Alhamdulillah, we are proud to be Muslims because our Islam and our deen teaches us that injustice is worthy of being opposed. That where there's terrorism around the world, where innocent life is being lost, we raise our voices. And that's why it's easy for us to look at what is happening in Palestine and discover our voice. And it might not be the top story on your news feeds. It might not be the top story as you scroll through your social media. But I tell you this, it has to continue to be a priority for you and everybody else. British Muslim TV is your platform. So we will come every week, inshallah, over the next few weeks in the run-up to the US election. And as I said, we'll have that big debate of the candidates towards the end. And, well, not candidates, but campaign representatives, should I say. It would be great if I could host a debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Thank you so much to the team behind the scenes for putting the program on. Thank you to you at home for watching. Many of you will watch this back on replay on social media. But wherever you are around the world, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you found the program useful. As always, please do share your feedback because that's really, really important for us. I'll be back next week with a new program with new guests, but the same questions. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.